Marcus Chen stared in disbelief at the moldy bread and rancid meat on his first-class plate. As the only Asian American CEO on the flight, he'd already endured the flight attendant's sneers and accidental spills on his $3,000 suit. Now this deliberately contaminated meal. When he calmly complained, the white flight attendant smirked. "Maybe you should stick to eating rice." The surrounding passengers laughed. Marcus nodded silently, pressing record on his phone. They had no idea who they were messing with or how this flight would end their careers. Would you have stayed silent or fought back immediately? Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and standing up against discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more incredible true stories of courage in the face of prejudice. Marcus Chen had never expected his journey to the prestigious Global Innovation Summit would turn into a nightmare. At 38, the self-made CEO of Mindspan Technologies had built his empire from scratch, transforming a small startup in his garage into a billion-dollar tech powerhouse. But despite his success, the shadow of racism followed him everywhere, even within the walls of his own company. That morning in his sleek San Francisco office, Marcus reviewed his presentation one last time. The summit in New York represented a crucial opportunity to secure international partnerships that would solidify Mindspan's future. As he made final adjustments to his slides, his office door swung open without a knock. "Got a minute?" Richard Winters, his white VP of operations, strolled in as if he owned the place. Though technically reporting to Marcus, Richard never missed an opportunity to undermine him. "What is it, Richard?" "I'm preparing for New York," Marcus replied, not looking up from his computer. Richard leaned against the desk, invading Marcus's space. "About that. The board and I were talking. Maybe I should represent us at the summit instead." Marcus stopped typing. "Excuse me?" "Well," Richard smiled condescendingly. "These old money investors, they might respond better to someone without an accent. No offense." Marcus straightened in his chair. Despite being born and raised in Chicago with perfect English, the accent comment was a familiar weapon. "I don't have an accent, Richard, and I'm the CEO. I'll be representing Mindspan." Richard's smile tightened. "Just thinking about the company's best interests. Your technical background might be better suited for the back office anyway." The implication was clear. Despite founding the company and holding patents for its groundbreaking AI algorithms, Marcus was still seen as the tech guy rather than the face of leadership. "The decision is made," Marcus stated firmly, ending the conversation. After Richard left, Marcus's assistant, Priya, entered with his travel documents. "Everything's arranged, Mr. Chen. Your flight leaves in 3 hours." "Thanks, Priya." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Any other updates I should know about?" Priya hesitated. "I wasn't supposed to mention this, but Richard has been holding closed-door meetings with several board members. Yesterday, they reserved the main conference room after hours. No agenda was shared." Marcus nodded slowly. This wasn't the first time Richard had attempted to gather support behind his back. "Send me the security footage when you can." As Marcus packed his briefcase, he included a flash drive containing evidence of Richard's latest scheme, an attempt to steal and claim credit for Mindspan's newest AI algorithm. He'd been gathering proof for months, planning to address it after securing the international deals in New York. On his way out, he passed the boardroom where several executives were gathered. They fell silent when he appeared. One of them, mistaking him for IT staff despite his tailored suit, asked him to fix the projector before realizing who he was. "Oh, sorry, Chen. Didn't recognize you," the board member mumbled, without a trace of genuine apology. Marcus simply nodded and continued walking. After years of these interactions, he'd learned to pick his battles. The flight to New York would be his only quiet time to review the evidence before the confrontation awaiting him. Little did he know that the 6-hour journey would become a battleground itself, testing not just his patience, but his very right to exist in spaces he had earned. The bustling San Francisco International Airport hummed with activity as Marcus approached the security checkpoint. Despite his first-class ticket and CEO status, he braced himself for what had become a predictable routine. "Next," called the TSA agent, a stern-faced man who barely glanced at the white businessman ahead of Marcus before waving him through. When Marcus stepped forward, everything changed. "ID and boarding pass," the agent demanded, scrutinizing Marcus's documentation far longer than necessary. "Chen? Is that supposed to be Chin? Chen?" He mispronounced deliberately, looking to his colleague with a smirk. "It's Chen," Marcus corrected politely, like Chen-gi in challenge. The agent ignored him. "Random selection for additional screening," he announced loudly, though Marcus had noticed the random selection button was never pressed. Two more agents appeared, guiding Marcus to a separate area where they roughly emptied his expensive briefcase, carelessly handling his laptop and documents. "What's this?" One agent held up his encrypted company flash drive. "Need to check for illegal technology. You people are always smuggling trade secrets." "That contains proprietary information for my company presentation," Marcus explained calmly. "I'm the CEO of Mindspan Technologies, heading to speak at the Global Innovation Summit." The agents exchanged doubtful looks. "Sure you are," one muttered. "And I'm Elon Musk." When Marcus politely asked them to be careful with his belongings, the lead agent stepped closer. "You got a problem with security procedures? We can make sure you don't board at all." After 30 minutes of harassment while other passengers moved swiftly through, Marcus finally reached his gate just as first-class boarding began. His phone buzzed with a text from Priya. "Richard called an emergency. Finance review for tomorrow. Trying to access restricted accounts." Sighing, Marcus joined the first-class line, only to be immediately confronted by a flight attendant with a pinched expression and perfectly coiffed blonde hair. Her name tag read, Vanessa Reynolds. "Coach, boarding hasn't started yet," she said without looking at his ticket. "I'm in first class," Marcus replied, extending his boarding pass. Vanessa glanced at it dismissively. "Wait here," she said, before warmly greeting the white passengers behind him. "Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. We're so pleased to have you with us today." When she finally returned to Marcus, she grudgingly checked his boarding pass. "Follow me," she said without the courtesy titles she'd offered others. As Marcus walked down the jet bridge, he could hear Vanessa chatting animatedly with a white passenger behind him about the lovely champagne service they could expect. On board, the pattern continued. Vanessa refused to hang his coat, claiming the closet was full, then immediately hung the jacket of the next passenger. When Marcus reached his seat 2A, the surrounding passengers visibly recoiled. A woman across the aisle whispered audibly to her husband, "I thought first class was supposed to be exclusive." A heavy-set white businessman in 2B, already settled, with a pre-departure scotch, looked up with obvious displeasure. "There must be some mistake," he called to Vanessa. "Can you check his ticket again? His kind doesn't belong up here." "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Williams," Vanessa apologized, though not to Marcus. "Would you prefer we find you another seat?" "Bradford Williams." The man introduced himself to Vanessa, ignoring Marcus completely. "My company, Williams Global Partners, spends millions with your airline annually. I expect certain standards." As Marcus stored his briefcase, he noticed the familiar logo on Bradford's briefcase. Williams Global Partners was the parent company of NextGen Dynamics, a potential investor he was scheduled to meet in New York. The same company that had mysteriously backed out of 3 previous meeting attempts. Have you ever been in a situation where you were judged before anyone even knew who you were? Comment number 1. If you've experienced discrimination in places where you had every right to be. Hit the like button if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of their appearance, and subscribe if you want to see more stories about standing up against injustice. As Marcus settled into his seat despite the hostile environment, could he have imagined that the prejudice he faced was more than random racism, but part of a calculated plan? What would you do if you discovered the person treating you terribly was connected to your business future? Stay tuned to see how this shocking situation unfolds. As the massive aircraft lifted off the runway, Marcus tried to focus on his upcoming presentation. rather than the hostile environment surrounding him. He opened his laptop, only to be interrupted by Vanessa's shrill announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now at cruising altitude. First-class passengers will be serving complimentary champagne momentarily." Marcus watched as Vanessa and another flight attendant moved through the cabin, personally serving each passenger with practiced smiles. "Here's your champagne, Mrs. Anderson. Enjoy, Mr. Thompson." The warmth in her voice vanished when she reached Marcus's row, skipping him entirely while serving Bradford Williams with a flourish. After waiting several minutes, Marcus pressed his call button. Vanessa took her time responding, eventually approaching with visible annoyance. "I didn't receive my champagne," Marcus said quietly. "Oh, we're out," Vanessa replied curtly. "I can get you water." Marcus nodded. "Water would be fine, thank you." When she returned, Vanessa accidentally tilted the glass, sending ice water cascading onto Marcus's laptop and the documents spread across his tray table. "Oops," she said, without a hint of remorse. "You should be more careful about where you put your things." Marcus quickly lifted his laptop, shaking off the water while reaching for napkins. Bradford snickered beside him, making no move to help. "These Asians and their computers," Bradford said loudly into his phone, not bothering to lower his voice. "They take over everything these days. Coming to America, stealing our jobs, now they think they can sit in first class like they own the place." Marcus quietly began recording these incidents on his phone, positioning it on his tray table with the camera inconspicuously facing outward. Meanwhile, a new passenger arrived late to first class and was immediately offered the supposedly unavailable champagne. The cabin speaker crackled to life again. "Good afternoon. This is Captain Robert Whitmore speaking. I want to personally welcome our distinguished first-class passengers. We're honored to have you flying with us today." Minutes later, the cockpit door opened, and a tall, distinguished man in a pilot's uniform emerged. Captain Whitmore moved through the first-class cabin, stopping at each seat to personally greet passengers. "Mr. Williams, always a pleasure to have you aboard," the captain beamed, shaking Bradford's hand vigorously. "How's the family?" "Thriving, Robert. Junior just got into Harvard, following in the old man's footsteps." "Excellent. Keeping the legacy alive." The captain methodically greeted every passenger by name, engaging in brief, friendly conversation. When he reached Marcus, his smile evaporated. Marcus extended his hand, but Captain Whitmore looked past him, proceeding to the next row without acknowledgement. The message was clear. Marcus was invisible, unworthy of the same respect afforded to other first-class passengers. Several travelers noticed the snub, exchanging amused glances. When turbulence hit midway through the flight, Vanessa rushed through the cabin. "Mr. Williams, please secure your seatbelt. Can I get you anything to make you more comfortable?" She moved methodically through the cabin, checking on each white passenger with maternal concern. When she reached Marcus, her demeanor shifted entirely. "Just buckle up tight, buddy," she said dismissively, as if addressing a child before moving on. Marcus continued recording, documenting each interaction. The systematic nature of the treatment suggested something beyond random prejudice. It felt coordinated, deliberate. As he witnessed the stark contrast in how others were treated with dignity while he was ostracized, Marcus wondered what awaited him when meal service began. He couldn't possibly have anticipated just how dangerous things were about to become. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now beginning our first-class dining service," Vanessa announced with practiced elegance. "Today, our executive chef has prepared a selection of gourmet entrees for your enjoyment." Marcus watched as flight attendants unveiled each meal with theatrical flair. Across the aisle, a woman received perfectly seared salmon with roasted asparagus. Bradford was served a magnificent filet mignon, cooked to his exact specifications. Each plate looked like it belonged in a high-end restaurant, arranged with artistic precision on fine china. When Vanessa finally approached Marcus's seat, she practically dropped the covered plate in front of him. "Your meal," she stated flatly, without the descriptions or pleasantries offered to others. Marcus lifted the silver cover and immediately recoiled. The sight and smell hit him simultaneously. Bread with visible green mold, meat that had clearly spoiled, discolored and emitting a putrid odor. A strange whitish powder was sprinkled across everything. This wasn't merely substandard food. It was inedible, possibly dangerous. "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly, trying not to draw attention. "There seems to be a problem with my meal." Vanessa glanced at his plate and shrugged. "Looks fine to me." "The meat is spoiled," Marcus pointed out, "and there's mold on the bread." Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. "Your people will eat anything, won't you? I've seen those street markets on TV. This should be gourmet compared to that." Several nearby passengers chuckled. Bradford leaned over, examining Marcus's plate with exaggerated disgust. "If you're too picky to appreciate what you're given, maybe you should fly economy next time. Or better yet, a Chinese airline." Marcus maintained his composure, discreetly taking photos of the contaminated food with his phone. In the galley, ahead, he noticed Vanessa whispering to other crew members while pointing toward his seat. They all laughed, watching expectantly. A young flight attendant trainee with Melissa Garcia on her name tag observed from the sidelines, her expression uncomfortable as she witnessed the interaction. Unlike the others, she didn't join in the laughter, but she didn't intervene either. "I'm not going to eat this," Marcus stated firmly. "Could I please have a replacement meal?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "Now you're causing trouble. First the champagne, then the water incident. Now you're ungrateful for your meal. Should I call the captain?" "He's been nothing but problems since boarding," Bradford added, as if he were part of the crew. Typical entitlement. Taking a breath to remain calm, Marcus decided to try a tiny corner of the bread that appeared less moldy, thinking perhaps the issue was merely cosmetic. Almost immediately, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. A strange tingling sensation spread across his tongue, followed by an itching in his throat that he recognized all too well. The beginning of an allergic reaction. Marcus reached for his carry-on bag beneath the seat, searching for his emergency allergy medication. To his horror, the small case containing his EpiPen was missing. He distinctly remembered packing it that morning, as he did for every trip, but then recalled the TSA agents rummaging through his belongings during the random search. Had they deliberately removed it? The tingling in his mouth intensified, and the first hints of hives began appearing on his wrists. Marcus realized with growing alarm that what he'd just experienced wasn't mere negligence. It was potentially attempted harm. Someone had deliberately contaminated his food with something he was allergic to, and now his emergency medication was mysteriously gone. As his breathing began to feel constrained, Marcus looked around the cabin. Vanessa and Captain Whitmore exchanged knowing glances from across the first-class section. Bradford Williams smirked beside him, typing something into his phone. Whatever was happening, it was clear this was no coincidence. The question was whether Marcus could prove it before his situation became life-threatening, and whether anyone on this flight would help him when they discovered what was happening. Marcus felt his throat beginning to close. What had started as a tingling sensation rapidly escalated into a full-blown allergic reaction. His body betrayed the panic his mind fought to control. Hives erupted across his skin like wildfire, and each breath became more laborious than the last. He pressed the call button repeatedly, the small overhead light blinking urgently. Vanessa glanced in his direction but continued chatting with passengers in the opposite aisle. After pressing the button for nearly 3 minutes without response, Marcus raised his hand. "I need medical assistance," he managed to say, his voice already hoarse and strained. "I'm having an allergic reaction." Bradford shifted irritably in his seat. "Oh, for God's sake, stop being so dramatic. You took one bite of food you didn't like and now you're putting on a show?" Marcus loosened his tie, feeling the constriction in his throat worsening. He pressed the call button again, more insistently. "Someone needs to confiscate that button from him," Bradford announced loudly. "Some people just don't know how to behave in first class." Marcus's breathing became audibly wheezy. He struggled to his feet, knowing he needed to find help immediately. When he stood, the cabin seemed to sway beneath him. Whether from the allergic reaction or the plane's movement, he couldn't tell. He staggered toward the galley where flight attendants were preparing coffee service. Vanessa saw him approaching and stepped directly into his path. "Sir, return to your seat immediately," she demanded, Passengers aren't allowed in the service area. Can't breathe, Marcus wheezed, touching his throat. Need EpiPen. He's drunk and disorderly, Vanessa announced to nearby passengers. This is exactly why we have air marshals on flights. She turned to a male flight attendant. Frank, alert the captain. Marcus's vision began to blur at the edges. The hives had spread to his neck and face, and his lips were visibly swelling. He gripped the edge of a service cart to steady himself. From behind Vanessa, the young trainee Melissa Garcia noticed his distress. She pushed past her senior colleague. Medical training overriding intimidation. He's having anaphylaxis, Melissa stated firmly, reaching for the first aid kit. This isn't intoxication. Return to your station, Vanessa ordered. I'm handling this. Melissa hesitated only briefly before defying the order. Sir, do you have an EpiPen? She asked Marcus directly. Marcus shook his head, struggling to form words. TSA. Removed. From bag. Understanding the severity of the situation, Melissa quickly retrieved the emergency medical kit from its compartment. Inside was an epinephrine injector for precisely such emergencies. Step back, she told Marcus, preparing the injector. With professional efficiency, she administered the epinephrine into his thigh through his clothing. Marcus slumped against the bulkhead, the medication beginning its work almost immediately. His airways slowly reopened, though the hives and swelling remained. Captain Whitmore emerged from the cockpit, his expression shifting from annoyance to calculated concern when he saw other passengers watching. What's the situation here? He asked, directing the question to Vanessa rather than looking at Marcus. Passenger had some sort of episode, Vanessa replied dismissively. Melissa overreacted. I followed standard medical emergency protocol, Melissa countered respectfully but firmly. The passenger was experiencing anaphylaxis after consuming contaminated food. The captain frowned. We need to document this properly. No need to alarm the other passengers. He turned to address the curious onlookers. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a minor disturbance, but everything is under control. Please return to your entertainment and enjoy the remainder of the flight. As Marcus's breathing stabilized, Vanessa pulled Melissa aside, speaking in a harsh whisper that Marcus could still hear. I know your place, trainee. You've been with us for what, 3 weeks? When senior crew handles a situation, you back off. Are we clear? Melissa's gaze dropped to the floor. He needed medical attention. What he needs isn't your concern. We know how to handle these people. Unknown to the crew, multiple passengers had recorded the incident on their phones. An elderly woman across the aisle had captured Vanessa's initial refusal to help. A businessman 2 rows back had recorded the entire exchange, including the captain's dismissive response. As Marcus returned to his seat, still shaky but breathing easier, he overheard the crew in hurried conversation. How do we document this? Frank asked quietly. Passenger became ill after meal service, Captain Whitmore replied. No mention of food quality issues or delayed response. We offered immediate medical assistance. Standard form, no incident report necessary. From his seat, Bradford was texting rapidly. Marcus caught a glimpse of the screen. Asian problem being handled before NY meeting. Delay tactics working. Will update after landing. The pieces were starting to fit together, painting a picture far more disturbing than random prejudice. As Marcus recovered his strength, he realized this flight was merely the beginning of a much larger battle. One that threatened not just his dignity, but his company, his career, and possibly his life. Have you ever been in a situation where someone refused to help you when you truly needed it? Comment number 1 if you've ever had your medical concerns dismissed or minimized. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves proper medical attention regardless of their race or background. Subscribe if you want to see justice served in stories like this one. What sinister plot could be behind this seemingly coordinated attack on Marcus? Is Bradford Williams just a prejudiced businessman, or is there something more calculated at play? Stay tuned to discover the shocking truth behind this mid-air conspiracy. As the epinephrine coursed through his system, Marcus's mind cleared despite the residual discomfort of his allergic reaction. The text he'd glimpsed on Bradford's phone kept replaying in his thoughts. Asian problem being handled before NY meeting. With trembling hands, he discreetly retrieved his own phone and opened his browser, connecting to the aircraft's Wi-Fi. First, he searched Bradford Williams, along with Williams Global Partners. The results confirmed his suspicions. Bradford wasn't just any executive. He was the chief strategy officer at Williams Global Partners, the parent company of NextGen Dynamics. The same company that had been attempting a hostile takeover of Mindspan Technologies for the past 6 months. Marcus dug deeper, scanning financial news articles. 3 weeks ago, NextGen had increased their offer for Mindspan shares after being repeatedly rebuffed by the board. The timing of this flight, just before the crucial Global Innovation Summit where Marcus would secure international partnerships that would make Mindspan too expensive to acquire, couldn't be coincidental. Another search revealed something even more disturbing. Bradford Williams and Richard Winters, Marcus's undermining VP, had attended the same business school. A photo from an alumni event showed them with their arms around each other's shoulders, grinning widely. The caption identified them as longtime friends and business associates. The picture became clearer. Richard's attempts to take Marcus's place at the summit, the mysterious board meetings, the efforts to access restricted financial information. It was all part of a coordinated effort with NextGen. A notification from his email interrupted his research. Priya had sent the security footage he'd requested, showing Richard entering the server room where Mindspan's proprietary algorithms were stored. The timestamp showed 2:14 a.m., long after business hours. Bradford shifted in his seat beside Marcus, heading to the lavatory. In his haste, he left his phone unlocked on the armrest. Marcus hesitated only briefly before glancing at the screen. A text conversation was open. "Is he out of commission yet?" Bradford had replied, "Almost. They served the meal. Having an allergic reaction now. Won't make the meeting." The response came quickly. "Perfect. I'll have the paperwork ready. Board. Votes tomorrow at 9. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just about stopping him from attending the summit. It was about incapacitating him long enough for Richard to call an emergency board vote to accept NextGen's takeover offer. The contaminated food wasn't a racist flight attendant's petty cruelty. It was attempted corporate sabotage. Bradford returned from the lavatory, immediately noticing Marcus looking away from his phone too quickly. His expression darkened. "Spying, are we?" Bradford hissed, snatching his phone. "That's corporate espionage." "Like what Richard Winters is doing at my company," Marcus countered quietly. Bradford's momentary surprise confirmed everything. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Chen. People like you don't belong in the boardroom. You're supposed to be the tech guy, not the face of the company." "So this was all planned," Marcus stated rather than asked. "The random TSA search, removing my EpiPen, the contaminated food. You're working with my VP to steal my company." Bradford's lips curled into a smirk. "Prove it. Your word against mine. A respected American businessman versus some overambitious immigrant who probably stole his algorithms in the first place." "I was born in Chicago," Marcus replied evenly. "Doesn't matter. You'll always be foreign to people who count." Bradford leaned closer. "By the time this plane lands, your little company will be in the middle of a takeover. Richard's calling. The vote first thing tomorrow. Without you there to stop it, the board will fold." Bradford pressed his call button, and Vanessa appeared almost instantly. "This man was looking at my phone," Bradford complained loudly. "I think he's trying to steal proprietary business information. I want him arrested when we land." Vanessa nodded somberly. "I'll alert the captain immediately, sir." Minutes later, Captain Whitmore emerged from the cockpit again, approaching Marcus with ill-concealed hostility. "Mr. Williams has informed us of a serious security breach," the captain stated. "I've radioed ahead to have airport security meet our aircraft upon arrival. They'll escort you to a private room for questioning." "On what grounds?" Marcus asked calmly. "Interfering with the flight crew, creating disturbances, and now corporate espionage," the captain listed. "We take these matters very seriously." As the captain returned to the cockpit, Marcus realized the gravity of his situation. This wasn't just about enduring a 6-hour flight of discrimination. Bradford, Richard, and apparently the flight crew were coordinating to ensure he would be detained upon landing, missing the critical board vote that would determine his company's fate. The carefully orchestrated plan stunned him with its thoroughness. From the moment he'd stepped into the airport, every indignity had served a purpose, culminating in what could have been a fatal allergic reaction. Now, facing potential detention by airport security, Marcus knew he had just hours to counter a conspiracy that had been months in the making. With 3 hours remaining before landing, Marcus assessed his situation with the strategic mind that had built Mindspan Technologies. They had planned everything meticulously, but they had made one critical miscalculation: underestimating him as an opponent. First, he needed to secure the evidence he already had. Using the plane's Wi-Fi, Marcus encrypted and emailed the photos of his contaminated meal, recordings of the discriminatory treatment, and screenshots of Bradford's text messages to his legal team with a brief explanation of the situation. He BCC'd his personal attorney with instructions to be at the airport upon landing. "Prepare for emergency injunction against board vote," he wrote. "Possible corporate espionage and attempted physical harm." Next, he needed allies. The young flight attendant Melissa had shown integrity by helping him despite pressure from her colleagues. As she passed with the beverage cart, Marcus pretended to accept a napkin from her. Hidden inside was a hastily scribbled note. "Not right. What they're doing. Crew was paid extra for this flight. Don't know by who. I can help." Marcus wrote a response on the cocktail napkin. "Need witness statements from other passengers who saw what happened. Can you ask discreetly?" When Melissa collected his empty water cup, she took the napkin and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Meanwhile, Bradford made several calls from the first-class satellite phone, speaking in hushed tones about expediting security response and ensuring appropriate measures upon landing. Each call further confirmed the conspiracy's reach. Marcus overheard 2 flight attendants whispering about their bonus for this flight. "Easiest 500 I've ever made," one said. "Just treat one passenger like garbage," Williams said. "His company handles these situations all the time," the other replied. "Just never talk about it afterward. Too many lawyers these days." This casual comment triggered something in Marcus's memory. Using the Wi-Fi again, he searched for news about Asian executives experiencing discrimination on flights before major business events. To his surprise, several stories appeared, none making major headlines, but following a pattern. Asian executives delayed, detained, or dealing with health issues on flights before crucial meetings. In 3 cases, the executives' companies had been acquired shortly afterward. More disturbing still, flight records showed Bradford Williams had been on 2 of those flights. Marcus sent another email to his legal team. "Search for pattern of discrimination against Asian executives before corporate takeovers. Possible RICO violations. Check Williams Global Partners connection." An email notification appeared from Li Yuan, a Chinese tech CEO Marcus had met at a conference last year. Li had responded to Marcus's inquiry within minutes. "Same thing happened to me before Suntech acquisition. Have dashcam footage of Bradford Williams meeting Captain Whitmore. In parking lot before flight exchanging envelope. Never had chance to use it. Sending now." The video file downloaded slowly over the airplane Wi-Fi, but clearly showed Bradford slipping what appeared to be cash to the same captain currently flying Marcus's plane. As Marcus documented everything, he noticed a woman a few rows ahead, watching him intently. When their eyes met, she discreetly showed him her business card. Dr. Sarah Johnson, attorney, International Human Rights Law. She'd been observing the entire situation unfold. During a bathroom break, Dr. Johnson managed to speak with Marcus briefly in the aisle. "I've witnessed everything," she whispered. "This is a clear civil rights violation. I'm also on the board of the Airline Passengers Rights Association. I can testify to what I've seen." She slipped him her card with her personal cell number written on the back. "Call me when we land. I'll help you file immediate charges." Vanessa noticed them talking and rushed over. "Return to your seat immediately," she ordered Marcus. "And you," she turned to Dr. Johnson, "need to stay in your assigned area." "I was simply returning from the lavatory," Dr. Johnson replied calmly. "We'll be moving you to another section for the remainder of the flight," Vanessa insisted, escorting Dr. Johnson away despite her protests. Bradford watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. "Making friends won't help you," he muttered to Marcus. "My security team will be waiting at the gate. You'll be lucky if you make your meeting by next week." But Marcus wasn't listening. His mind was assembling the pieces of his counter-strategy, identifying weaknesses in their plan, and preparing for the confrontation to come. They had power, money, and connections, but he had truth, evidence, and the strategic brilliance that had built his company from nothing. As the captain announced they were beginning their initial descent into New York, Marcus knew the next 2 hours would determine not just the future of his company, but whether corporate America would continue to allow prejudice to be weaponized for profit. With landing less than an hour away, Marcus executed his counter-strategy with precision. First, he needed to ensure his evidence couldn't be confiscated. Opening his laptop, he connected to Mindspan's secure server through an encrypted VPN. "They think of me as just a tech guy," Marcus thought with grim satisfaction. "Let's use that to our advantage." He remotely accessed his company's security system, sending secure messages to his 3 most trusted board members, individuals who had resisted Richard's influence. He attached time-stamped evidence of the conspiracy, including the dashcam footage showing Bradford bribing Captain Whitmore. "Emergency situation. Richard Winters colluding with NextGen for hostile takeover. Attempting to detain me upon landing to prevent me from stopping board vote. Do not convene board until I arrive." He marked the message as "critical security breach" to ensure immediate attention. Next, Marcus contacted his friend Elena Davidson at the FBI's Corporate Espionage Division. They'd worked together when Mindspan helped develop software for tracking financial crimes. Possible attempt to sabotage American tech company through corporate espionage and physical endangerment of CEO. Evidence of conspiracy involving cross-state actors. Requesting agent at JFK International upon landing, Gate 32B, arriving United 788. With external support mobilizing, Marcus took his boldest step yet. Positioning his phone to capture both himself and Bradford, he began live streaming to Mindspan's executive team. "This is Marcus Chen, CEO of Mindspan Technologies," he began calmly. "I'm currently on United Flight 788 to New York, where I've been subjected to coordinated discrimination, contaminated food that triggered a severe allergic reaction, and threats of detention upon landing." He turned the camera slightly to include Bradford in the frame. "The man beside me is Bradford Williams, Chief Strategy Officer of Williams Global Partners, parent company of NextGen Dynamics, which is attempting a hostile takeover of Mindspan. He has coordinated with my VP, Richard Winters, to remove me from tomorrow's emergency board vote." Bradford's head snapped up at the sound of his name. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he growled, lunging for Marcus's phone. "Live streaming to my executive team and board members," Marcus replied, angling away while keeping the camera steady. Bradford grabbed for the phone. "Give me that right now." In the struggle, Bradford's true colors emerged without restraint. "You people need to learn your place," he shouted loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You think you can come to our country and take over our companies? You should be making our phones, not running tech firms." Several passengers turned in shock at the outburst, some pulling out their own phones to record. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final descent into New York. Please turn off all electronic devices at this time." Marcus continued streaming. The evidence being broadcast live was too important to interrupt. Vanessa rushed down the aisle. "Sir, you need to turn off your device immediately. I'm documenting a civil rights violation and corporate espionage attempt," Marcus replied calmly. "I have the legal right to record for my own safety." "This is a violation of air safety regulations," Vanessa insisted. "I'll need to confiscate your phone." "Actually, he's well within his rights," came a voice from behind them. Dr. Johnson had returned to first class despite being relocated. Federal aviation regulations permit recording if there's reasonable belief of ongoing discrimination or criminal activity. As someone who just witnessed a man being threatened and physically accosted, I'd say that standard has been met. Captain Whitmore emerged from the cockpit again, his face flushed with anger. This is my aircraft, and I make the rules during flight. If you don't end that transmission immediately, I'll divert this plane and have you arrested for interfering with the flight crew." "Is that the same flight crew that served me contaminated food and ignored my medical emergency?" Marcus asked, his voice steady as he continued streaming. "The same crew that's receiving bonuses from Williams Global Partners to discriminate against me?" The captain blanched. "That's a serious accusation." "With serious evidence to back it," Marcus replied. "Evidence that's now being viewed by the FBI's Corporate Espionage Division and my company's board of directors." The live stream had reached over 3,000 viewers, including several financial reporters who followed Mindspan's social media accounts. The cabin had become eerily quiet as passengers realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Bradford made a final desperate attempt, offering a whispered proposition. "End the stream now. Drop everything. I'll make sure NextGen offers 10% above market value for Mindspan. You walk away rich, this all disappears." Marcus simply adjusted his camera to ensure it captured Bradford's offer. As the plane descended toward New York, the power dynamic had shifted dramatically. The conspirators who had planned so carefully now scrambled to contain a situation spinning beyond their control. But Marcus knew landing would be the most dangerous moment, when Bradford's security team and airline-influenced airport police would attempt to separate him from his evidence and delay him long enough for Richard to complete the takeover. The real battle was just beginning. As the wheels touched down on the runway, Marcus prepared for the confrontation awaiting him at the gate and the race against time to save his company. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they could easily take advantage of you? Comment number 1 if you've ever turned the tables on someone who didn't see your true capabilities coming. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of preparation and quick thinking in the face of injustice. Subscribe if you want to see more stories of underdogs fighting back against corrupt systems. Will Marcus be able to make it past the Aukinkao security waiting at the gate? Can he reach the board meeting in time to stop Richard's betrayal? What will happen when all the evidence of this conspiracy is revealed to the world? Stay tuned for the shocking conclusion to this high-stakes corporate battle. The aircraft taxied slowly to the gate, seemingly taking forever as tension built in the first-class cabin. Marcus ended his live stream but kept his phone recording in his pocket. Through the windows, he could see what awaited him. 2 airport security officers and a man in a dark suit who matched Bradford's earlier description of his security team. "Flight attendants, prepare doors for arrival," came the standard announcement as the seatbelt sign turned off. Before passengers could stand, Captain Whitmore's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you remain seated momentarily. Security personnel will be boarding to address a situation with a passenger. This won't take long." Marcus watched as the jetway connected and the main door swung open. 2 uniformed airport security officers stepped aboard, followed by the suit-wearing man whose hand conspicuously rested inside his jacket. Vanessa rushed forward. "That's him," she pointed directly at Marcus. "He's been disruptive and threatening throughout the flight. He also refused to follow safety protocols during landing." The officers approached Marcus's seat. "Sir, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us," the taller one stated firmly. "May I ask on what charges?" Marcus inquired calmly. "This isn't an arrest," the officer replied. "We just need to ask some questions regarding your behavior during this flight." Bradford smiled smugly from his seat. "I'll be sure to give a full witness statement about his conduct," he offered loudly. As Marcus stood to comply, a commanding voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, officers." Dr. Johnson stepped into the aisle, presenting her credentials. "I'm Dr. Sarah Johnson, attorney and board member of the Airline Passengers' Rights Association. I've witnessed this entire flight, as have numerous other passengers. What we've seen is a systematic pattern of racial discrimination and possible endangerment of this passenger." The officers exchanged uncertain glances as she continued. "At least 12 passengers have video evidence of discriminatory treatment, including deliberate contamination of food that triggered a severe allergic reaction, which the crew initially refused to treat." She gestured around the cabin where several passengers nodded in confirmation, holding up their phones. "That's absurd," Vanessa interjected. "We provided immediate medical assistance." "After refusing it multiple times," countered Melissa, the young flight attendant, stepping forward despite Vanessa's glare. I administered the epinephrine after senior crew members dismissed his symptoms as dramatics. This is a personnel matter, Captain Whitmore said sharply. Trainee Garcia is speaking out of turn and will be disciplined accordingly. Retaliation against whistleblowers is a serious offense, Captain, Dr. Johnson noted. Perhaps you'd like to explain why you were recorded accepting cash from Mr. Williams in the airport parking lot before this flight? The captain's face drained of color. Bradford stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm a platinum member with this airline and a respected business leader. Wesley, he addressed the man in the suit. Get on the phone with Director Simmons immediately. Tell him we need these officers replaced. Attempting to interfere with airport security through executive influence? Marcus asked quietly. That would be another felony to add to the list. The commotion had drawn attention, and passengers from business and economy classes were now crowding the aisle, watching the confrontation unfold. Phones recorded from every angle. Officers, another voice called. A slender man in an airline uniform with executive insignia pushed through the crowd. I'm Kevin Reynolds, Regional Manager for Customer Experience. I've been monitoring this situation remotely after receiving alerts about a viral video showing discriminatory treatment on this flight. Captain Whitmore straightened his uniform. Kevin, this passenger has been disruptive and... I've seen the videos, Robert. The manager cut him off coldly. All of them, including footage of this passenger being denied medical attention and being served what appears to be deliberately contaminated food. The airline's legal team is already reviewing the material. He turned to the security officers. Stand down, please. There will be no detention of this passenger. Bradford's face contorted with fury. This is outrageous. Wesley, call Simmons now. The man in the suit shifted uncomfortably. Sir, Director Simmons isn't answering, and there are news crews gathered at the terminal. What? Bradford hissed. Your live stream reached over 20,000 viewers, Marcus explained quietly, including several financial journalists who cover the tech sector. They're rather interested in why the CSO of Williams Global Partners would contaminate the food of a competitor's CEO before a major board vote. Bradford's expression shifted from anger to calculation. Lowering his voice, he leaned toward Marcus. Let's be reasonable businessmen. This has gotten out of hand, but there's still a deal to be made. NextGen is prepared to offer a 20% premium on Mindspan's current valuation. You walk away wealthy, we both issue statements claiming this was all a misunderstanding, and everyone wins. Marcus regarded him steadily. Except for the next Asian executive you target, or the flight crew you bribe to endanger passengers. This isn't about money, Bradford. It's about stopping a pattern of corruption and discrimination that you've clearly been running for years. As passengers disembarked, giving Marcus supportive nods and sharing contact information as potential witnesses, Bradford made one last desperate attempt to salvage his position. But it was too late. The conspiracy that had seemed so perfectly orchestrated just hours earlier was now unraveling in full public view, with consequences that would reach far beyond a single flight or company takeover. Marcus stepped into the gleaming terminal of JFK International to find a scene he hadn't anticipated. Television cameras and reporters clustered near the gate, held back by airport security, but clearly waiting for him. His live stream had done more than alert his company. It had ignited a media firestorm. Mr. Chen, several journalists called out as he emerged. Can you comment on the discrimination you faced? Is it true Williams Global Partners tried to sabotage your company through racial targeting? Before he could respond, a familiar face pushed through the crowd. Anita Desai, Mindspan's chief legal counsel, flanked by 2 assistants and a security team of their own. No comments at this time, Anita announced professionally, creating a path for Marcus. Mr. Chen is late for an urgent business matter. Once inside a private airport lounge, Anita briefed him rapidly. Richard called an emergency board meeting for 4 p.m., claiming you had a mental breakdown on the flight and were unfit to continue as CEO. He's presented some convincingly edited footage of you appearing erratic during what he described as routine service issues. Marcus checked his watch, 3:32 p.m. How many board members are buying it? 3 have expressed concerns. 2 are firmly on your side. The rest are waiting to hear both sides. She handed him a tablet. Richard has been busy. He's drafted a press release announcing your temporary leave of absence due to health concerns and his appointment as interim CEO. He's also prepared a merger agreement with NextGen, pending board approval. Marcus scanned the documents quickly. He's moving faster than I anticipated. Where's the meeting? Manhattan headquarters. Traffic's brutal today. There's a parade on 5th Avenue. Then we don't have time to waste. Marcus straightened his suit. What about Bradford? His company issued a statement denying any involvement with your personal difficulties and expressing concern about your accusations. Anita's expression hardened. They're trying to paint you as unstable and paranoid. Outside the lounge, Marcus spotted Bradford hurrying toward a private exit, flanked by security. Their eyes met briefly across the terminal. Bradford's filled with cold fury, Marcus's with resolute determination. The drive into Manhattan became a race against time. While stuck in traffic, Marcus received an alert that NextGen's PR team had begun quietly informing key financial journalists about the upcoming acquisition of Mindspan Technologies, causing their stock to plummet 18% in minutes. They're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, Marcus muttered. Drive down our value, make the takeover look inevitable, pressure the board to accept before the stock crashes completely. When they finally pulled up to Mindspan's headquarters, the situation worsened. Bradford's associates were physically blocking the entrance, claiming to be concerned investors, requesting information about the leadership transition. NYPD officers eventually cleared a path, allowing Marcus and his team to enter the building. They rushed to the executive floor, where the boardroom doors were closed with Richard's assistant standing guard. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, she said without meeting his eyes. The meeting is closed. Mr. Winters left specific instructions not to be disturbed. Step aside, Linda, Marcus replied calmly. I'm still the CEO of this company. Inside the boardroom, Richard was mid-presentation, displaying carefully selected clips from the flight that showed Marcus appearing agitated, but conveniently omitting the provocation and discrimination. As you can see, Richard was saying smoothly, Marcus's behavior has become increasingly erratic. This public incident is unfortunately the culmination of concerns many of us have had privately for months. For the company's stability, temporary leadership change is... The door swung open. Richard froze mid-sentence as Marcus walked in, followed by Anita and the security team. Marcus, Richard recovered quickly, forcing a concerned expression. I'm so glad you're here safely. We were just discussing the unfortunate events on your flight. Please sit down. You must be exhausted after such an ordeal. I'm fine, thank you, Richard, Marcus replied evenly, approaching the head of the table, his rightful seat. Though I'm curious why you're presenting edited footage of my erratic behavior without mentioning the contaminated food, racial slurs, or corporate espionage involved. Richard's smile tightened. I think the stress of your position has led to some paranoid interpretations of routine travel inconveniences. Routine? Marcus connected his phone to the boardroom's presentation system. Let me show the complete footage, shall we? For the next 20 minutes, the board watched in stunned silence as the full evidence unfolded. The systematic discrimination, the contaminated meal, the medical emergency deliberately ignored, Bradford's admission of targeting Marcus to prevent him from attending the vote, and finally, the connection between Richard and Bradford revealed through their prior relationship and ongoing communication. This is disturbing, the lead director said finally. Richard's composure cracked. He lunged for the system controls, attempting to terminate the presentation. This is clearly manipulated footage. He's trying to distract from his failures as CEO and the excellent offer NextGen has made. Security restrained Richard as he continued his tirade. You're deleting evidence, Richard, Marcus noted calmly. But it won't help. Everything I've shown is being simultaneously transmitted to our major shareholders, the SEC, and the FBI's Corporate Espionage Division. Richard's face contorted with rage. You think you've won? People like you will never truly belong in this industry. You should have stayed in the lab where your kind belongs. The outburst hung in the air, confirming everything the footage had. suggested about the motivations behind the conspiracy. Security escorted a still-shouting Richard from the boardroom. The board members sat in uncomfortable silence, processing what they'd witnessed. "I believe we have 2 votes to conduct," Marcus said finally. "First, on whether to accept Richard's recommendation for my removal, and second, on NextGen's acquisition offer." The vote was unanimous on both counts. Richard's recommendation was rejected, and NextGen's offer was firmly declined. But as Marcus would soon discover, winning this battle was merely the beginning of a much larger war. 1 week after the flight incident, Marcus sat in his office reviewing Skyward Air's official response to his formal complaint. The letter was predictably defensive. After thorough internal investigation, Skyward Air has found insufficient evidence of intentional discrimination. While we acknowledge service issues occurred on Flight UA788, we attribute these to miscommunication and training gaps rather than racial bias. As a goodwill gesture, we are pleased to offer you 50,000 bonus miles and our sincere apology for any discomfort experienced. Marcus placed the letter beside similar responses he'd received throughout his career. Deflections that acknowledged discomfort while denying systemic problems. Anita entered with the latest updates. Captain Whitmore and Vanessa Reynolds have been placed on administrative leave pending further review. Translation: they'll be back flying within months once the publicity dies down. "And the criminal charges?" Marcus asked. "The airline's legal team is arguing that food contamination can't be proven deliberate, and that denied medical attention is contradicted by the fact that you ultimately received treatment." She sighed. "They're painting Melissa Garcia as an inexperienced trainee who misinterpreted standard procedures. Her employment status is currently under review. They're punishing the whistleblower." Marcus nodded, having expected nothing less. "And Bradford?" Williams Global Partners has distanced themselves completely, claiming he was acting without company authorization if any inappropriate interactions occurred. They've placed him on leave, but he'll likely resurface at another firm within their network. "And Richard?" "Hired by NextGen Dynamics as strategic consultant, with stock options exceeding his mind-span compensation. They're rewarding him for trying to facilitate the takeover." Marcus turned to the window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. What had happened on that flight wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern he'd observed throughout his career, one that countless other executives of color had experienced. "We're not letting this go," he decided. "This isn't about one flight or one company anymore." Over the following days, Marcus took the fight public. He published a detailed account of his experience, including video evidence that couldn't be dismissed. Boycott Skyward Air began trending as passengers shared their own experiences of discrimination. The airline's stock dropped 12% in 3 days. More significantly, other executives began coming forward. James Wong, CEO of Quantum Solutions, described being detained by airport security before a major merger negotiation. Dr. Lakshmi Patel, CFO of Biogenics, shared security footage of flight attendants deliberately spilling coffee on her presentation materials before an investor pitch. A pattern emerged: executives of color experiencing travel incidents before key business events, often with Bradford Williams or his associates somehow connected to the flights. Melissa Garcia, now officially terminated for violating company protocols, became a key whistleblower, providing internal communications showing flight crew members were offered special compensation for flights carrying certain flagged passengers. Dr. Sarah Johnson helped Marcus connect with civil rights organizations and assemble a class action lawsuit representing 28 executives who had experienced similar discrimination. The suit named not just Skyward Air, but 3 other airlines, Williams Global Partners and NextGen Dynamics, alleging a conspiracy to use racial discrimination as a tool for corporate advantage. The response was predictable. Airlines announced new diversity training initiatives, while privately circulating memos instructing staff on how to document incidents to minimize legal exposure. Williams Global Partners hired a prominent Asian American executive as their new chief diversity officer, a position with visibility but no actual authority. Behind the scenes, industry leaders attempted to discredit Marcus. Financial analysts suddenly questioned Mindspan's growth projections. Articles appeared suggesting Marcus was playing the race card to distract from business challenges. Richard, gave interviews describing Marcus as unstable and paranoid. The FAA and Department of Transportation launched investigations but warned that findings could take 12 to 18 months, long enough for public interest to fade. Yet something unexpected happened. The story refused to disappear. Every corporate denial and half measure was met with increased scrutiny. When Skyward Air's CEO dismissed the incidents as isolated, employees leaked internal emails showing leadership had been warned about discriminatory practices for years. Bradford's network of influence began unraveling as well. Former associates, sensing the shifting tide, provided evidence of similar tactics used against competitors across multiple industries. What had seemed an isolated incident on a single flight was revealing itself as an entire ecosystem of discrimination weaponized for corporate gain. As the legal and public relations battle intensified, Marcus realized this fight would be measured not in days or weeks, but in months and years. The system had deep roots and powerful defenders, but for the first time, those roots were being exposed to the light, and even the most powerful defenders were finding themselves unable to escape scrutiny. 6 months after that fateful flight, the landscape had fundamentally changed, not just for Marcus and Mindspan, but for an entire industry forced to confront its darkest practices. Distinguished colleagues, industry partners, and friends, Marcus began, standing at the podium of the Global Tech Leadership Conference, the same event he had been traveling to when the incident occurred. 6 months ago, I boarded a flight as a CEO and discovered I was also a target. The grand ballroom of New York's Plaza Hotel was filled with technology leaders from around the world. Unlike previous years, the audience was noticeably more diverse, a visible shift in representation that was one of many changes sparked by what the media now called the Skyward incident. What happened on that flight was not about one meal, one crew, or one passenger, Marcus continued. It was about systems designed to maintain certain barriers, systems that had operated in the shadows for decades. He clicked to the first slide, displaying a timeline of events since that day. The class action lawsuit had been settled for $142 million, with airlines implementing court-monitored inclusion programs and transparent complaint procedures. More importantly, the settlement included structural changes, independent oversight boards with actual authority, protection for whistleblowers, and compensation structures revised to eliminate incentives for discriminatory treatment. Accountability doesn't end with financial penalties, Marcus explained. It requires fundamental changes to power structures. Skyward Air had become the most visible face of this transformation, following leaked emails revealing leadership had knowingly permitted discriminatory practices. Shareholders had forced the resignation of the CEO and restructured the executive team. Captain Whitmore and Vanessa Reynolds had been permanently removed from passenger service, with their aviation licenses under review. Marcus touched the screen, changing to the next slide, a screenshot of Mindspan's newest application. Today, I'm proud to announce the launch of FlightWatch, a platform allowing passengers to document discrimination in real time, with direct links to transportation authorities and automatic backup to secure servers. No incident disappears. No complaint gets lost in processing. The free application had been developed in partnership with civil rights organizations and airline employee unions, who had grown tired of being pressured to participate in discriminatory practices. Technology can reinforce barriers or dismantle them, Marcus continued. The choice belongs to those who build it. Bradford Williams's fate had been particularly satisfying. The federal investigation into corporate espionage had uncovered evidence of similar tactics used against multiple competitors. Williams Global Partners was under indictment for racketeering, with Bradford himself facing criminal charges for conspiracy, attempted corporate sabotage, and civil rights violations. Richard Winters hadn't fared much better. His celebratory move to NextGen had soured quickly when their involvement in the conspiracy became public. Now he was a co-defendant in multiple lawsuits, his reputation irreparably damaged. His final email to Marcus, a vitriolic message filled with racial slurs and threats, had been submitted as evidence of the animus underlying their corporate espionage. The conference room hushed as Marcus revealed his most significant announcement. Leadership isn't just about running a successful company. It's about creating systems that allow everyone to succeed based on merit, rather than privilege. He paused, letting the statement settle. That's why I'm announcing the creation of the Equitable Innovation Fund, a $50 million initiative supporting entrepreneurs of color navigating discriminatory business environments. The fund would provide not just capital, but legal resources, mentorship, and network access, addressing the very barriers Marcus had confronted throughout his career. As applause filled the room, Marcus displayed a final split screen. On one side was the photo of the contaminated airline meal that had started everything. On the other, today's front-page headline, Skyward Air announces historic leadership overhaul. First Asian American CEO takes control. They thought they could ground one man, Marcus told the audience. Instead, they launched a movement. The applause grew, building into a standing ovation that spread from the front rows to the back of the room. In the audience, Marcus spotted Melissa Garcia, now employed as Mindspan's Director of Corporate Ethics, and Dr. Sarah Johnson, whose legal expertise had been instrumental in building the class action case. As the applause continued, Marcus allowed himself a moment to savor the final twist, one he hadn't shared publicly yet. Through a complex series of financial maneuvers, Mindspan had acquired a controlling interest in Skyward Air during its post-scandal devaluation. The next time I board a first-class cabin, Marcus had told his executive team after signing the acquisition papers, I'll be the one who owns the plane. The transformation was far from complete. Discrimination hadn't been eliminated from corporate America or the transportation industry. But systems that had operated without accountability for decades were now exposed to scrutiny. Executives who had weaponized prejudice for profit were facing consequences, and in boardrooms across the country, discussions were taking place not because of virtue but necessity. Discrimination had become a liability no company could afford. For Marcus Chen, the journey that began with a contaminated meal had transformed not just his company but an entire business ecosystem. As he concluded his speech to thunderous applause, he knew the true victory wasn't in punishment or retribution, but in creating lasting change that would benefit countless others who would never have to experience what he had endured on that flight. The meal had been meant to poison one man's career. Instead, it had become the catalyst for healing a poisoned system. The story of Marcus Chen's flight ordeal reveals powerful truths about discrimination and corporate ethics in America. First, racism isn't just about personal prejudice. It can be weaponized as a business tactic, used deliberately to undermine competitors and secure advantages. When bias becomes a strategic tool, it reveals how deeply discrimination has infiltrated professional structures. Second, this narrative demonstrates the critical importance of evidence in fighting systemic discrimination. Marcus prevailed not just through determination, but by methodically documenting every incident, building a case that couldn't be dismissed as oversensitivity or misunderstanding. In today's digital age, documentation has become a powerful weapon against injustice. Third, the story highlights how individual incidents connect to larger patterns. What happened to Marcus wasn't isolated, but part of a widespread practice affecting many executives of color. By recognizing these patterns and joining forces with others who experienced similar treatment, Marcus transformed a personal grievance into systemic change. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us about effective response to discrimination. Marcus didn't just seek compensation or punishment. He pushed for structural reforms that would prevent others from facing similar barriers. True justice isn't just about addressing past wrongs but creating systems that prevent future ones. Finally, this narrative reminds us that change requires both individual courage and collective action. One person standing up makes a difference, but lasting transformation comes when that stand inspires others to join the fight, creating a movement that can't be ignored or silenced. Have you ever stood up against discrimination or witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race or ethnicity? Share your experience in the comments below. How would you have responded in Marcus's situation? Would you have recorded everything like he did, or taken a different approach? If this story resonated with you, Hit that like button to help it reach others who might be facing similar challenges in their professional lives. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate those brave enough to fight back. Remember, sharing these stories isn't just about spreading awareness. It's about creating the momentum for real change. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to speak truth to power when facing your own moments of injustice.